The sun crept over the jagged horizon like a thief in the night, casting long shadows across the dusty plaza of Whispering Sands. Wooden gallows stood crooked in the center, two splintered beams lashed together with rawhide ropes, a noose swaying gently in the dry breeze. The air smelled of sagebrush and sweat, thick with the murmurs of a restless crowd. Boots scuffed the parched earth, kicking up clouds of red dust that clung to everything like bad luck. The town was a forgotten speck on the map where justice was swift and often blind, handed down by men with grudges and guns rather than scales and fairness. Miners fresh from the shafts mingled with ranch hands and shopkeepers, all drawn by the spectacle of death that promised to break the monotony of their hardscrabble lives. Townsfolk gathered in clusters, hardened miners with calloused hands that spoke of endless toil, underground women in faded calico dresses clutching shawls against the morning chill that bit like a coyote's teeth, kids peeking wide-eyed from behind skirts, their innocence already tainted by the harsh realities of the frontier. Whispers slithered through the throng like sidewinders in the sand, carrying tales of the accused woman's crimes embellished with each retelling until they sounded like legends from a dime novel. "That woman's a viper," one grizzled old-timer muttered, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt where it sizzled faintly on the hot ground. Poisoned, her employer cleaned out his safe stuffed with gold dust and greenbacks and lit out for the badlands under cover of night. "She'll dance at the end of that rope before the cock crows twice, mark my words." Another voice, sharp and bitter as alkali water. "Should have fed her to the coyotes. Quicker that way, and they'd do a better job than any hangman." At the heart of it all stood Lorelei, mid-20s, wrists bound tight with coarse hemp that bit into her skin like barbed wire, ankles shackled in rusted iron that chafed with every shift of her weight. Her once pristine homespun dress hung in rags stained with trail dust from her capture blood, from a split lip, courtesy of an overzealous deputy, and the spittle of her accusers, who saw her as nothing more than a scapegoat for their own misfortunes. Her auburn hair fell wild and matted over a bruised face, one eye swollen shut from a sheriff's backhand that had come without warning in the jail cell. She didn't cry no tears left after the jailhouse beatings and the endless silence of a town that had already judged her guilty without a shred of real evidence. In Whispering Sands, being poor and alone was crime enough, and Lorelei had been both since her family perished in a flash flood years ago. The preacher, a wiry man with a Bible worn thin as parchment from constant thumbing, droned from a dog-eared page, his voice lost in the wind that carried the scent of distant, rainless storms. Sheriff Kane leaned against a post, arms crossed over his barrel chest, toothpick clamped between yellowed teeth, eyes scanning the crowd like he was tallying votes in a rigged election or sizing up who might cause trouble after the deed was done. A bottle shattered at Lorelei's feet, shards glinting in the faint light like broken promises. "Burn the witch," a voice hollered from the back, belonging to a bitter widow who'd lost her husband to the same fever that claimed Lorelei's kin. "No," countered an elder voice, gravelly with age, and "too many cigars, ropes cleaner. Quicker. Lets the soul find peace faster, or so they say." The hangman, a booze-soaked drifter named Zeke with a hacking cough that rattled his bones like loose pebbles in a can, looped the noose with trembling hands that betrayed his nerves or perhaps his hangover. He avoided her gaze, muttering a half-forgotten prayer under his breath, words slurred and insincere. Sheriff Kane nodded once, sharp as a knife edge drawn across a throat. The rope slipped on around Lorelei's neck, coarse fibers scratching like claws against her tender skin. Zeke stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow with a filthy sleeve. The crowd hushed, breath held like a loaded chamber in a revolver anticipation thick as the dust in the air. Then thunder. Hooves pounded the earth like war drums, exploding into the square from the outskirts where the badlands began. Gasps rippled through the mob as a midnight black stallion reared high, kicking up a storm of dust that choked the onlookers and obscured the gallows for a moment. Astride it sat Blackjack Hawke, late 30s, a legend whispered in saloons from Tombstone to Abilene, the most feared gunslinger this side of the Rio Grande, a man whose name alone could clear a room or start a brawl. His long duster coat, the color of storm clouds, heavy with unshed rain, flapped like raven wings in the wind. A wide-brimmed Stetson shadowed a face carved from granite, scarred by bullets, and betrayal lines etched deep from years of hard riding and harder choices. His eyes, steel gray and unyielding, swept the scene like a hawk spotting prey from on high, missing nothing, not the sheriff's twitchy fingers, not the preacher's trembling hands. He drew a pearl-handled Colt from his hip holster, the metal gleaming coldly in the dawn light, and fired once into the paling sky. The crack echoed off the adobe walls of the surrounding buildings, freezing the square, solid as if time itself had stopped. "Hands off my bride!" Hawke growled, voice low and rough as gravel under boot heels carrying the weight of a man who'd stared down death more times than he could count. Silence crashed down like a felled oak in a quiet forest. No one moved. Not the preacher Bible fluttering in his grip like a trapped bird. Not Zeke rope slack in his hands that suddenly felt too heavy. Not even Sheriff Kane, whose hand twitched toward his badge and the revolver hidden beneath his vest. "Drop that noose," Hawke barked, swinging his revolver down to point at the gallows with unerring accuracy. Sheriff Kane stepped forward, mustache twitching like a nervous cat's tail. "Who in tarnation are you, stranger? This here's town business, lawful execution for murder and theft. Business you don't want to tangle with." Hawke cut him off, his tone, brooking no argument. He flicked a folded paper from his saddlebag, tossing it at the preacher's feet with a casual flick of his wrist. It unfurled in the dust, a marriage certificate, ink fresh as yesterday's blood-bearing names, and a date that made the crowd murmur anew. Zeke hesitated, eyes darting to Kane like a cornered animal seeking guidance, then backed away slowly, the noose slipping from Lorelei's neck with a whisper of fiber. Hawke dismounted in one fluid motion, boots thudding against the planks like Judgment Day arriving on horseback. He climbed the steps, each one creaking under his weight, as if protesting the intrusion. Lorelei didn't look up, head bowed, breath ragged from exhaustion and fear she refused to show. "You all right, darling?" he murmured, voice softening just a notch as he touched her arm gently, a rare tenderness in a man known for his iron fist. She swayed, knees buckling like a colt in a storm, the weight of the ordeal finally catching up. He caught her, scooped her up in arms corded with muscle from years on the trail, holding her, as if she weighed no more than a feather. Turning to descend, bang, a shot rang out for him, the crowd, the report sharp and startling. Hawke spun faster than a rattler's strike, his Colt barking twice in rapid succession. The shooter, a Weasley deputy with a grudge nursed over too many lost poker games, crumpled, clutching his chest where blood bloomed like a deadly flower. Chaos erupted, screams piercing the air, like arrows scattering, feet kicking up more dust, more guns drawn from holsters with the rasp of leather. Hawke vaulted onto his stallion Thunder with Lorelei cradled against him protectively. He kicked the horse hard, spurs digging in, and they bolted through the square, dust devils swirling in their wake like angry spirits. Bullets whined past like angry hornets, splintering wood from nearby buildings and pinging off rocks in the street. The noose swung empty, now a ghost in the dawn light, mocking the town's failed justice. Lorelei was gone, vanished into the badlands, with a man forged in fire leaving behind a trail of confusion and rage. Thunder's hooves devoured the cracked earth of the plains, golden grass whipping past in a blur that made the world seem like a painting smeared by speed. Lorelei slumped against Hawke's chest, unconscious from the beatings and the shock, her face pale as moonstone against the bloodstains on her dress that told tales of brutality. He held her steady with one iron arm, reins gripped in the other, jaw set like a trap, ready to spring his mind, already mapping escape routes through the unforgiving terrain. Behind them, the distant rumble of pursuit hooves and hollers, a posse whipped into frenzy by Sheriff Kane's badge, and bile their horses, foaming at the mouth as they pushed hard to catch up. Kane rode at the front, his face twisted in fury, vowing to bring back the escaped prisoner or die trying. Hawke reached a fork in the trail, where the path split like a serpent's tongue, reined in thunder sharp to avoid detection. Dismounted swiftly, led the horse backward, through a dry wash, scattering prints like whispers lost in the wind. Then doubled back west, dragging a branch behind to fake their path east, erasing signs with the skill of a man who'd evaded lawmen and outlaws alike for decades. The sun climbed higher, scorching the land like a branding iron, fresh from the fire heat waves dancing on the horizon. By noon, sweat soaking his shirt, he found a hidden cleft in the rust-red hills, a shallow cave shaded by twisted mesquite trees that clawed at the sky. He laid Lorelei on the cool dirt floor, the cave's interior dim and musty, trickled water from his canteen onto her cracked lips, watching as it revived her slightly. She coughed, eyes fluttering open wide with confusion and the haze of pain. "Where?" she whispered, voice hoarse as a desert wind that had blown for miles without respite. "Safe," Hawke said, simply handing her the canteen with a steady hand. "If I hadn't ridden in, you'd be dancing with the devil by now." That ain't justice, that's coyote law, where the strong devour the weak without remorse. Lorelei blinked, propping herself up on elbows that trembled. Why'd you? Her question trailed off unfinished, but hanging heavy in the air. He turned away, scanning the horizon through the cave's mouth. Dust clouds rose in the distance, a search party hounds baying faint on the wind, their howls carrying promises of vengeance. We got company, he muttered, grabbing his Winchester rifle stock worn smooth from countless grips and battles long past. Two groups converged on the landscape town roughnecks in faded denim and sweat-stained hats armed with rifles in righteous anger, and black-clad riders on sleek mounts, bounty killers led by Vasquez, a scar-faced tracker from Juarez eyes, black as midnight oil, his reputation for never losing a trail as dark as his soul. Hawke swore low under his breath, a curse that blended with the wind. The men who'd hired him to plug Lorelei must have caught wind. He'd gone rogue, defying the contract for the first time in his blood-soaked career. Now they're tying up loose ends with lead, sending their best to finish what he wouldn't. We gotta move, he said, helping her up with surprising gentleness. She winced, pain shooting through her like lightning. I can't. My legs feel like they've been dragged through hell. You don't run. You trust. He led her through a narrow rock chute, the walls closing in like the jaws of a trap, crouching behind boulders with a view of the pass below. Tide thunder hidden behind an outcrop loosened the saddle to fake abandonment as if they'd fled on foot. They waded wine howling like lost souls through the rocks, grit stinging their faces. Footsteps crunched closer, boots on loose gravel. Three men crested the ridge, two locals with rifles slung carelessly, one Vasquez's man, his eyes sharp and predatory. Hawke breathed, steady sights aligned on the Winchester. Squeeze crack. The first dropped like a sack of feed body crumpling in a heap. Panic scattered the others like quail flushed from brush. Second shot felled the bounty hunter clean through the heart. The third fled boots, slipping in terror on the loose stones, his cries echoing back. Lorelei stared, breath hitching in her throat. You don't miss. Her voice was a mix of awe and horror. I aim true, Hawke replied, lowering the rifle slowly. In her eyes, not fear, but a spark, understanding dawning, like first light over the mountains illuminating the man behind the legend. The canyon walls rose steep as canyon wren calls echoed, faintly painted copper by the dying sun that cast long shadows like fingers reaching for them. Hawke built a fire in a sheltered alcove, sparks flying from flint like shooting stars against the gathering dusk. He set Lorelei down on a bed of soft sand, wrapped her in a wool blanket against the chill that descended with the night. She watched him, flames dancing in her eyes, reflecting the fire's warmth. Silence stretched taut as a bowstring broken only by the crackle of wood. Finally, you didn't answer. Why save me? Her words were soft but insistent. Hawke cleaned his rifle motions, deliberate and methodical, each swipe of the cloth a ritual. You didn't beg, didn't scream, didn't weep when they looped that rope around your neck. She frowned, confusion knitting her brow. What kind of reason's that? Sounds like something from a tall tale. Guilty folks holler for mercy, make deals with the devil. Innocent ones, no words won't bend iron or change minds, set like concrete. He met her gaze across the flames. I watched you, Lorelei, for nigh on 2 weeks before the hanging from the shadows of the town, seeing how you carried yourself. Her blood ran cold, a chill deeper than the night air. Watched, why who are you really? I was hired to end you. Quick bullet, no fuss, no trail leading back. She recoiled, scooting back against the rock wall, but he held her eyes with a steady gaze. But I couldn't pull the trigger. Saw you feed a starving kid your last biscuit in the alley behind the saloon. Take a lashing for shielding a saloon gal from a drunkard's rage. Fear in your boss's eyes when he looked at you, not yours. You were framed, someone else's dirt on your hands planted to cover their tracks. The fire crackled, embers popping like secrets bursting forth. Lorelei didn't sleep that night, mind racing like a Mustang, heard across open plains, thoughts tumbling over each other. In the dark hours before dawn, she rose quiet as a shadow gathered her tattered things with hands that shook slightly. Beside her worn boots sat a new pair, soft leather, her size perfect, and a note scratched on a scrap of paper. If you hightail, at least do it comfortable. She hesitated, glanced at Hawke, feigning sleep by the dying fire, his breathing even, but alert. Sank down slowly, boots untouched, deciding in that moment to stay. Dawn broke golden over the canyon. She sat across from him as he stirred. Ain't running, she said firmly, meeting his eyes. He nodded, faint a ghost of approval in his expression. Figured as much. You're stronger than you know. Trust flickered between them, fragile as a candle in the wind, but growing with each passing moment. The sky softened to azure blue wind whispering through scrub brush like old ghosts telling tales. Hawke hunted jackrabbits with his bowie knife silent and efficient, leaving Lorelei to tend the fire and beans simmering in a battered pot. As she folded his coat to keep it neat, a paper slipped out, yellowed crease from folding Lorelei K $500. Clean, paid. The words stared up at her like accusations. Her hands shook as if holding a live snake. Hawke returned rabbit slung over his shoulder, skinning knife in hand. Saw the paper in her grip, didn't flinch or look away. You were going to kill me for 500 silver eagles, she said, voice steady as a loaded gun despite the tremor inside. Yep, you'd be number 22 on a list that's too long already. She didn't buckle under the weight of the revelation. You watched. Decided I didn't deserve it after all that time? He nodded slowly. Pulled his revolver from its holster, placed it between them on a flat rock like an offering. If you want payback, take it. I won't dodge or beg fair's fair. Wind howled through the canyon carrying a sand that stung like tiny needles. She reached out, not for the gun, tore the paper to shreds with deliberate rips, scattered the pieces to the flames where they curled and blackened. You didn't run from the truth, didn't lie to my face. Saved me instead when you could have walked away rich. Keep doing that, Blackjack Hawke, and maybe we got a chance. He exhaled long and slow tension easing from his shoulders. Reckon I will if you'll have it. Ain't much for promises, but that's one I can keep. Ashes swirled up in the heat, something kindled deeper than the fire, a bond forming from shared secrets and unspoken understanding. The desert stretched, endless before them. Heat shimmers rising like ghosts from the sand, distorting the horizon into mirages of water and shade. Days bled into nights under a relentless sun that blistered skin and parched throats, wind-carving canyons in their souls with its ceaseless howl. Hawke taught Lorelei the ways of the wild, with patient guidance, reading tracks in the dust to spot danger early, finding water and cactus hearts by slicing them open with precision, aiming true with a revolver that kicked like a mule. Breath in, slow hold. It's steady, squeeze gentle. Like you're caressing a lover, he set his rough hand over hers on the revolver's grip, steadying her aim. Tin cans pinged off rocks as she learned her initial flinch, fading to focused determination with each shot. Nights by stars scattered, skies that seemed endless. She asked questions that peeled back as layers. Before this life of guns and shadows. Who were you really? Soldier in the war between the states, fighting for a cause I barely understood. Then bounty man chasing down the wicked for coin. Then, nothing but ghosts and regrets. Why nothing? What broke you? Killing's easy when it's just a job. Living with the ghosts of the dead. That's the real showdown, the one you can't win with a fast draw. She saw him then, not the legend painted in blood, but the man haunted by echoes of screams and the weight of choices made in haste. The ambush came without warning, a rifle crack splitting the air like thunder. Hawke jerked in the saddle, blood blooming on his shoulder like a crimson rose unfurling. He tumbled from thunder, groaning in pain, hand clawing for his gun through the haze of shock. Lorelei froze for a heartbeat, heart pounding. A scarred outlaw stepped from behind boulders, revolver cocked and gleaming. End of the line, Hawke. Vasquez sends regards and a bullet for your trouble. Hawke raised his piece with his good arm, too slow blood loss slowing his legendary speed. Lorelei acted on instinct, aimed the revolver he'd taught her, fired without hesitation. The kick jarred her bones like a hammer blow, but the bullet struck a true center mass, punching through the outlaw's chest. The man staggered, eyes wide with disbelief, collapsed in the sand in a heap. She knelt by Hawke, tears carving clean tracks through the dust on her face. I killed him. The words tasted bitter, a mix of regret and resolve. You saved us both. He gritted through clenched teeth, touching her cheek with a bloody hand. Reckon we're square now, darling. No debts between us. The sky bruised purple as dusk fell. They staggered into the abandoned mine timbers. Rotten and creaking rails buried in sand drifts. A sign creaked in the wind. El Dorado numbered on a relic of boom times long gone. Hawke was feverish blood soaking through hasty bandages, his skin hot to the touch. Lorelei laid him on a wooden platform left by miners, stitched the wound with needle and thread, from his saddlebag hands steady despite the tremble of fear. Outside hooves approached through the gathering dark, Vasquez's remnants guns gleaming in the moonlight, voices low and menacing. Lorelei found dynamite crates in a corner, old but potent, with the smell of nitroglycerin. Wired fuses along the shaft with careful hands left a narrow entry like a funnel for death. "They come. We fight tooth and nail," she told Hawke, kissing his fevered brow. Hooves halted outside. Voices carried Hawke's bleeding out like a stuck pig. "Girls bonus, take her alive if you can." Two entered, the shaft boots echoing. Lorelei struck a match fuse, hissed like an angry snake. Boomrock and fire roared through the mine, sealing the shaft in a cascade of rubble and screams that echoed long after. She rushed back through the dust, coughing. Hawke's eyes opened, weak, searching. "You, all right." "Safe," she sobbed, laughed, relief flooding her. "Stay with me. You hear? Don't you dare leave me in this world alone." His hand found hers, weak but warm. "Ain't going nowhere, not while there's breath in me." Morning light filtered through cracks in the collapsed entrance, dust motes dancing like tiny spirits. Hawke woke slowly, pain dulled to a throbbing ache. Lorelei held his hand, her grip fierce as a hawk's talon. "If no bounties chase us, no ghosts haunt your steps, who are you now?" she asked softly. "The man you chose to stand with," he whispered, voice rough but sincere. She smiled, faint a ray of hope. "And I ain't regretting it one bit." Shadow Valley emerged like an oasis, a speck on the map where paths faded like boot prints in rain washed away by time. Adobe buildings squatted under mesquite shade, their walls baked hard by the sun, saloons buzzing with low-stakes poker games and tall tales spun over warm beer. The air carried the scent of fresh tortillas and horse sweat, a place where folks came to forget or start anew. At the town's edge stood a modest cantina, Lorelei's Haven, a name painted boldly on a wooden sign that swung gently in the breeze. Hawke hammered shutters into place. His scarf faded on his arm like an old memory, the work therapeutic after years of violence. Inside, Lorelei served coffee, black as night, and tamales spiced with chili. Her flour-dusted apron, a badge of her new life, humming an old frontier tune passed down from her mother. The door creaked open one afternoon, admitting a dusty stranger with eyes hard as flint. "You Blackjack Hawke." The ghostwriter who outdrew death itself. Lorelei stepped up from behind the counter, wiping her hands. "That man's buried deep in the past. This one's mine now, husband, partner, and free." The stranger nodded slowly, tipped his hat with reluctant respect, left without a word or a backward glance. Hawke exhaled as the door shut. Not everyone needs the full tale spun out. Some things are best left in the dust. She wiped her hands on her apron, gazed at the horizon where the sun dipped low. "He came to end me with a bullet, chose life instead when he saw the truth. And I chose him not just to survive the storms, but to thrive in this wild land, building something real from the ruins." As the sun dipped low each evening, painting the sky in hues of fire and gold that reminded them of campfires past Lorelei and Hawke, stood on the porch of their cantina, the wind carrying whispers of the past, but no longer holding power over them like chains. The town of Shadow Valley bustled around them with the rhythm of daily life, cattle drives passing through it, merchants haggling over goods, children laughing in the streets, a place where stories were told over whiskey, but rarely questioned too deeply lest old wounds reopen. They had come a long way from the gallows of Whispering Sands, through chases that tested their resolve like a forge tests steel, and nights that forged their bond in the crucible of survival under starlit skies. The Badlands had tried to break them with its relentless sun beating down like a hammer, hidden dangers lurking in every shadow, but instead it had shaped them into something unbreakable, a partnership as solid as the rocky mesas that dotted the landscape. "Remember that first night in the cave?" Lorelei asked softly one evening, her voice carrying the lilt of someone who had found peace after turmoil, as they watched the sunset bleed red across the desert. Hawke nodded, a rare smile tugging at his lips, softening the hard lines of his face. "How could I forget? You looked at me like I was the devil himself, come to collect eyes full of fire and fear. And you looked at me like I was worth saving, despite the contract burning a hole in your pocket," she replied, squeezing his hand with fingers calloused from work and worry. Their life now was simple yet fulfilling, far from the legends that once defined Hawke as a harbinger of death. No more bounties to chase, no more running from shadows that lengthened with each kill. The cantina served as their anchor in the shifting sands, a place where travelers stopped for a hot meal and a kind word, leaving with full bellies and perhaps a bit of hope. Lorelei had taken to it naturally, her strength turning the small establishment into a haven for the weary souls who wandered the frontier, her recipes drawing folks from miles around. Hawke handled the repairs with the same precision he once used for his guns, his gunslinger days evident only in the way he scanned the room when a stranger walked in, or how he could still draw faster than thought if need be. One evening, as the stars began to prick the darkening sky like pinpoints of light in a velvet curtain, a group of ranch hands gathered inside their laughter, echoing off the adobe walls like echoes in a canyon. Lorelei poured coffee, listening to their tales of cattle drives through treacherous passes and narrow escapes from flash floods that could sweep away man and beast alike. Hawke sat in the corner polishing his old Winchester absent-mindedly, though it hadn't been fired in months except for target practice. A young cowboy, fresh-faced and eager with the bravado of youth, approached him tentatively. "Heard stories about you, mister. They say you outdrew 10 men in a single showdown down in El Paso, leaving them all in the dust." Hawke glanced up, eyes steady as a calm before a storm. "Stories grow taller than saguaros out here in the West. Best not to believe them all. Most are half-truth, half-whiskey-fueled fancy." The cowboy persisted, leaning in closer. "But you were Blackjack Hawke, right? The one who rode into Whispering Sands like a thunderstorm and stole a woman straight from the noose, riding off into the sunset with bullets flying." Lorelei overheard from across the room, setting down a plate of steaming enchiladas with a thud that silenced the table. "That woman chose her path with open eyes," she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for argument. "And that man's past is just that past buried under the sands. We don't dig it up here." The cowboy backed off, tipping his hat sheepishly. "No offense meant, ma'am. Just curious is all." "None taken," Lorelei replied, but her eyes held a warning sharp as a knife's edge, protecting their hard-won peace. Later, as they closed up the cantina for the night, sweeping dust from the floors and banking the fire, Hawke pulled her close in the dim light. "You handle 'em better than I ever could with words alone. I'm more for actions." She laughed, a sound like clear water bubbling in the desert after rain. "Someone's got to keep the peace around here. Can't have you drawing on every fool with a loose tongue." Their days blended into a comforting rhythm, mornings spent tending the small garden behind the cantina where Lorelei grew herbs and vegetables in the stubborn, arid soil, coaxing life from the earth with determination. Afternoons serving patrons who brought news from distant towns, tales of gold strikes or Indian raids. Evenings by the fire sharing quiet conversations that needed no words to convey depth, just the comfort of presence. But the past wasn't entirely buried no matter how deep they tried to inter it. One dusty afternoon, under a sky heavy with the promise of rare rain, a rider arrived, his horse lathered in sweat from a hard ride, foam flecking its mouth. He dismounted slowly, his coat hiding a bulge that could only be a holster heavy with iron. Hawke spotted him from the window, his hand instinctively drifting to his side where his colt rested. "Stay inside," he murmured to Lorelei, voice low and urgent. She shook her head stubbornly. "We're in this together, remember, no more lone wolf riding." The rider entered, dust falling from his boots like shed skin, his face weathered by sun and sin. "Blackjack Hawke. Got a message from an old friend down south. Vasquez's kin ain't forgotten the men you put down. They're coming for blood, yours and hers." Hawke's jaw tightened like a vice. Vasquez is dust in the wind. His kin can join him if they push it. The rider smirked, a crooked twist of lips. Bold words for a man gone soft, hiding behind a woman's skirts and a coffee pot. Lorelei stepped forward, her voice steel forged in fire. "He ain't hiding. He's living a life worth something. You tell him if they come sniffing around Shadow Valley, they'll find more than they bargained for, lead and resolve." The rider laughed, but there was no mirth in it, just hollow echoes. "I'll pass it along, sweetheart." He turned and left, mounting up and riding into the haze, leaving tension thick as smoke. That night, under a moon that hung low and full, Hawke checked his guns, oiling the mechanisms with practiced hands that remembered every pull of the trigger. Lorelei watched from the bed, worry etching her features like lines on a map. "Think they'll come?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Reckon so," he replied honestly. "But we ain't running this time. This is our ground, hard-earned." She nodded, pulling out the revolver he'd taught her to use, checking the cylinders. "Then we stand tall and fight if need be." The attack came at dawn, shadows lengthening as four riders crested the hill, overlooking the town, their silhouettes dark against the rising sun. Guns drawn, they charged the cantina with whoops and hollers, bullets splintering the door frame and shattering a window in a rain of glass. Hawke fired from the window, dropping one with a precise shot that echoed through the streets, waking the town. Lorelei crouched beside him, her aim steady as rock, taking down another as he dismounted, the man tumbling into the dirt. The remaining two scattered, seeking cover behind barrels and a water trough. Shouts echoed, "Surrender, Hawke, or we burn it all to the ground, your haven, your woman, everything." Hawke reloaded with calm efficiency as if it were just another day. "Over my dead body, and that'll cost you dear." A fierce exchange followed, lead flying like hail in a storm, pinging off metal and thudding into wood. One bounty hunter charged the door boldly. Lorelai's bullet found his leg, sending him sprawling with a yell. Hawke finished him with a shot to the shoulder, disarming rather than killing, a sign of his changed ways. The last man, seeing his comrades fall like dominoes, raised his hands in defeat. "Mercy! I surrender, don't shoot." Hawke stepped out onto the porch, revolver trained unerringly. "Get on your horse and ride out fast. Tell whoever sent you Shadow Valley's off limits to your kind. We protect our own." The man scrambled away, mounting his horse and fleeing, leaving dust in his wake and the town buzzing with awe. As the sun rose, fully bathing the scene in golden light, Lorelai bandaged a graze on Hawke's arm with tender care. "Close call," she said, voice shaking slightly now that the danger passed. He pulled her into an embrace, strong and reassuring. But we held our ground, together. Word spread after that incident like wildfire across dry grass. Blackjack Hawke and his bride had turned a quiet town into a fortress of will and grit. Travelers came not just for food, but for the story of redemption, whispered like folklore around campfires in the night, inspiring others to seek their own second chances. Years passed, the desert winds eroding the edges of their hardships like water over stone, smoothing rough memories. Children played in the streets of Shadow Valley, some calling Lorelai Auntie, as she handed out sweets from the cantina's counter, her smile warm as summer sun. Hawke taught a few young ones how to handle a horse with gentle reins, his lessons laced with warnings about the cost of violence and the value of mercy. One twilight, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Lorelai turned to him thoughtfully. "Ever regret choosing me over that bounty and the easy life it promised?" He shook his head without hesitation. "Best decision I ever made. You gave me a life worth living, not just existing in shadows. And you gave me strength I didn't know I had buried deep," she replied, leaning against him. Their bond, forged in fire and tempered by time's relentless march, became the stuff of legends, not of guns and glory that faded, but of love that conquered the wild frontier's trials. In the vast, untamed West, where justice was often written in blood on dusty trails, Lorelai and Hawke wrote theirs in enduring peace, a testament to resilience. But the West was never truly tame, its spirit wild as the mustangs that roam free. Whispers of new threats occasionally drifted in, with the traitors, outlaws seeking fame by challenging the old gunslinger, or old grudges resurfacing like ghosts from forgotten graves. Hawke kept his vigilance eternal, his eyes always scanning the horizon for dust clouds that might signal trouble, while Lorelai managed the cantina with a quiet authority that commanded respect from all who entered. One particularly harsh winter, a blizzard howled down from the mountains like a beast unleashed, blanketing Shadow Valley in snow. Rare for the arid region, drifts piling high against doors. Supplies ran low as roads became impassable, and tempers frayed among the townsfolk like worn ropes. A group of drifters, desperate and armed with makeshift weapons, rode in under cover of the storm, intent on raiding the cantina for food and warmth to survive the freeze. Hawke barred the door as the wind screamed outside, rattling shutters. Lorelai loaded rifles by the fire, her hands steady despite the cold, seeping through every crack like icy fingers. "They're coming," Hawke said, peering through a frosted window at shapes moving in the whiteout. "Let 'em try," she replied defiantly. "This is our home, they won't take it without a fight." The drifters pounded on the door demands, turning to threats that carried over the gale. "Open up or we'll burn you out. Storm be damned." Hawke fired a warning shot through the wood, the crack echoing over the howling wind. "Next one's for keeps. Back off." A tense standoff ensued, the storm raging as fiercely as the men's desperation hours stretching like taffy. But the drifters, realizing the folly of attacking a legend in his lair, backed off, eventually slinking away into the whiteout to seek easier prey. In the aftermath, as the snow melted under spring's thaw and green shoots pushed through the soil, the town rallied around them with gratitude. Shared meals and helped repairs solidified their place not just as survivors of the wild, but as pillars of the community unbreakable. Lorelai often reflected on her journey in quiet moments from the noose and whispering sands that nearly claimed her to this life of purpose and love. She had been a woman accused unjustly, broken but unbowed by fate's cruel hand, and now she was a force to reckon with, her spirit as vast as the badlands that once tried to swallow her whole. Hawke, too, found solace in the profound change. The ghosts of his past, those 21 souls taken in cold blood, and the one he spared out of rare compassion, faded with each sunrise that painted the sky anew. He no longer dreamed of gun smoke choking the air and regrets piling high. Instead, his nights were filled with the soft breathing of the woman beside him, a rhythm more soothing than any lullaby. As the years rolled on like tumbleweeds caught in the wind, their story became woven into the fabric of the West's lore. Ballads sung in saloons by wandering minstrels spoke of the gunslinger who chose love over lead and gold, and the bride who fought like a lioness defending her pride. Children grew up hearing tales of bravery, not in grand battles with armies, but in the quiet choices that defined a life worth living. Choices like turning from vengeance to mercy, from solitude to partnership. One final challenge came in their twilight years, when a young upstart, eager to make a name in a world that still revered fast draws, rode into town on a spirited bay horse. He called out Hawke in the square, his voice brash and full of false courage that masked insecurity. "Old man," they say, "you're the fastest draw this side of the Mississippi. Prove it, draw, or be called coward." Hawke stepped out from the cantina, his hair silvered like frost on sagebrush, but his eyes still sharp as a blade honed fresh. "Son, I've proven enough in my time to fill a graveyard. Go home while you can find a better path than blood." The young man drew anyway, quick but reckless hand flashing to his holster. Hawke's hand blurred in response, disarming him with a single shot that grazed the holster, sending the gun spinning into the dirt without harm. "Mercy ain't weakness," Hawke said calmly, holstering his own weapon. "It's wisdom hard-earned. Learn it now or learn it the hard way." The upstart fled humbled and alive, carrying a lesson instead of a bullet. Peace returned to Shadow Valley undisturbed. In the end, as the sun set on their lives like a final curtain call, Lorelei and Hawke sat together on the porch, hands entwined like roots grown together over time, watching the stars emerge one by one. Their legacy wasn't in the bullets dodged or enemies felled in dusty streets, but in the life they built from the ashes of despair, a testament to the enduring power of choice, trust and love in the unforgiving heart of the American frontier, where the land was wild, but the human spirit wilder still.